Hey, Jason, I know you're talking, but we're not hearing you right now.
All right, let's kick this off one more time. Hello and welcome to today's CDCT live session. I'm Jason Rader from Insight's Cloud and Data Center Transformation Division. Today we're talking about something that we are known for, our expertise in the storage arena. And our storage experts for today on taking a modern approach to storage are Dean Chyla, one of our senior architects here at CDCT. And we welcome our guest storage expert from Pure Storage, JP Petty. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, JP. Hey, Jason.
And thanks for the hookup that I was muted. So, assuming everybody's still here after that silence with me moving my lips, we're talking about storage, and we're really excited to kind of take this angle today with you guys. So just to kind of kick it off, to throw it out there and get some kind of conversation going, storage models are changing. What do we need to say to set the stage for today's conversation? JP?
Great question. So storage models are changing. We've seen the industry move toward flash, so we've got better performance. Data reduction has certainly made a big play in the storage space, but it's interesting now that we're seeing more and more of it shift to cloud, either hybrid cloud models or even storage as a service that's delivered entirely in the cloud or on-prem extended into hybrid cloud environments. So that's probably one of the biggest trends that we're seeing right now. Most of the CIOs and CFOs that I'm having conversations with really want to lead with, how do I adopt this more cloud-like model, even with my existing on-prem assets?
Okay, so it sounds like you're interfacing at the C-level with your conversations. Dean, are you interfacing with the infrastructure side as well and having these similar types of conversations?
Yeah, very much. Some of the conversations I'm having, storage almost becomes the middle child of infrastructure these days, right? Because there's a lot of pressure to use hyperconverged, or I don't want to buy any more storage, or I'm moving to cloud. But it's still a critical part of infrastructure. So I think hopefully today's conversation will help our technical partners have some more productive conversations.
Yeah, and so that's an interesting kind of angle, right? Because when we're having this conversation, there's this: is it leadership kind of having an initiative that they bring down to the infrastructure folks, or is it the infrastructure folks that are taking the new models up to leadership? And I think when I asked you guys this earlier, you guys said it's kind of both. So the answer is yes, right?
Yep, a little bit of both.
Yeah, from my perspective, it is very much both. Cloud models tend to give you some operational benefits, so the infrastructure team are keen to enjoy those benefits. A lot of people in the C-suite are interested in the cloud economics, or the cost advantages and budgetary advantages. So we see a lot of interest, and the really successful customers are the ones that are putting together kind of a holistic plan across the finance piece into operations and into the experience for their line of business owners. So it's kind of a perfect storm with everybody collaborating on this.
Yeah, and well, so when you say economics and we talk about these new models, I would be wrong to assume that a cloud model is just going to save a lot of money for my organization, or is that fair?
The costs tend to be honestly parity, sometimes a little bit cheaper, sometimes a little bit more. The difference is that the way it's consumed, you're paying as you go. So instead of having these massive big ticket items every 3 to 5 years, replacing and refreshing storage arrays, people are able to get the same quality of gear and the same experience, but they're paying for it over time, which gives them a lot of budget flexibility.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that people don't want to deal with storage, or management doesn't want to deal with storage, is it can be hard to figure out what you're going to need over the next year. I mean, think of how most budget cycles go. I need to figure out what my storage needs are going to be for the next year. And, I may go high, I may go low, but, so most times we tend to overestimate what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that creates a lot of risk for customers, either having to go back and ask for more money with a rebuy, which is nobody's, most fun day in the office, or you end up buying too much, and you can't actually utilize that storage until really late in the contract. So we're seeing kind of a new metric come out around cost per utilized gig, because people are interested in getting away from that over provisioning risk that as Dean mentioned, it's pretty hard to accurately forecast needs a year in advance, much less when you're putting an asset on the floor for a 3 to 5 year life cycle or even longer.
Right. I mean, I always kind of joke that people who think they really know where technology is going to be in 5 years are simply just guessing, right? And I think and everybody who has any kind of budgetary requirement usually budgets for the growth of the organization, which is that going to be, a hockey stick? Is it going to be steady growth like it was for the last 5 years? You never really can tell. But I like the kind of angle here, because you're solving a problem that I think is an age-old problem from a capacity perspective. If my job's on the line, I'm going to guess high so that I can make sure I have that additional capacity. But then, it's like buying low, selling high on the stock market. You buy high, sell low. If you bought too much capacity, now it's sitting there and you're not able to use it, even though you had that kind of buffer there. How does this model? What a cloud model save me there?
Yeah, absolutely. I can jump in on that. Cloud models operate kind of in a pay by the drip format. So you're paying for what you actually use, whether you're getting cloud native storage or you're getting storage as a service. So that gives customers a lot of flexibility to be able to say, I'm not going to blow 5 years of spend this quarter, by refreshing a critical piece of my infrastructure. You can defer costs over time and then pay for them as you get to the point that you would normally enjoy in a well-sized capital purchase environment, which is right at the end of the asset's life cycle. I am getting the absolute most value per gig out of that environment. You can start with that with these cloud models from day one, because you're only paying for what you're using. You're getting the best value over time.
And just for an example, so I have a customer that's a service provider, and they are looking at a cloud consumption model now because they have a long lead time for their service. So they don't want storage sitting on the floor for 18 months that's not utilized, right? So it allows them to start small with the capacity and then grow over time as needed.
Yeah, and that's huge. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there. One of my favorite customers too had a very, very similar experience. They enjoy, we talk about some of the economic benefits, but they really look at it as an operational advantage, because as a service provider, they have random requests that come in. I've got a very large project that I need to spin up very quickly because they work in finance. This allows them, as they put it, to be able to say yes to those customer requirements in real time, because you have the elasticity of those cloud models behind it. You're not going to outgrow S3. You're not going to outgrow, a properly built storage utility model. So that lets them, tell customers, yeah, we can do that. When do you need it? And then, have a third party that's delivering that as a service component, build and scale it behind them.
Yeah, and the reality is, quarter to quarter, year over year, business demands are going to change too, in sometimes unexpected ways. So you can plan as much as you want, but look at what happened this past year.
Yeah. There were a lot of fantastic plans earlier in the year.
Right.
Well, do we have good examples of like people that had adopted this as a service model and were kind of saved by it? I'm sure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one customer that we were able to work with. They had to double their remote workforce in the space of about 10 days. And because they were getting clear per unit pricing, because they knew exactly what the performance requirements were, and they could, purchase an SLA instead of, having to rapidly try and deploy additional hardware. They were able to get those users up and running and productive in a short amount of time. And again, keeping it on a contract that allows them to pay over, even like 12 months, rather than having to go out and buy a capital asset, that's going to be on the books for 5 years, even after a remote workforce, kind of scales back to normal sizes.
Yeah, we have quite a few customers that would not have been able to rapidly transition to a remote model if not for being able to purchase. They just wouldn't have been able to do a capital purchase, So being able to put storage in place and not have the upfront costs was a huge benefit.
Oh, I mean, even in the best of times, with all the lead time in the world, spinning up a capital hardware purchase is not quick and easy, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and the cloud models are great because customers then can look at it in terms of, renewal, expansion, and, price or commitments based on capacity amounts rather than, doing those big purchases up front. And, who knows if we'll still need it? Who knows if the requirements will change for the business over time? Maybe I need a different SLA. In a capital purchase, that means I've got to go buy another box. In an as a service model, you've got subscription management that allows them to be as agile as, or they can be as agile as necessary to meet the changing demands of the business.
I mean, it sounds like all the advantages are there. I mean, in this OpEx model, do we feel like the majority of folks are going to be adopting this moving forward?
Most of the industry evaluations and kind of CIO surveys and that kind of thing that I've looked at, it's pointing to a pretty rapid adoption. Sometime 2024, we're going to hit that kind of tipping point. Right. The interesting thing is that COVID has changed everything for a lot of people, and it's actually accelerating people's move to not just storage as a service, but infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, database as a service. Being able to stand things up without having an army of people on site, without having to deal with access issues that way, being able to scale up without a lot of heavy lifting to swap out hardware. The whole as a service thing has grown as a result of the common challenges, as well as the global economic trends that we're all living through at the moment.
Yeah, I think there are probably a few examples where it doesn't make sense, but we're definitely seeing, we're having a lot more of those conversations.
Yeah, occasionally, and that's a great point. No product is perfect for everyone. But if we look at it, purely from a financial perspective, there are, private equity-backed companies that really like to have assets on the books. People that are in various stages of IPO, sometimes it makes sense for them to be able to, put additional assets on balance sheet. Sometimes it doesn't. But again, that's one of the reasons why the CFO is really interested in participating in these projects, because it not only changes the budget, it really changes, the way the balance sheet is managed over time for that organization.
That's, I think it's interesting when we think about this tipping point aspect, and of course the rapid adoption that's being, moved our way because of the situation that we're all in, and the folks that were kind of adopting us on the front end were a lot more prepared at this point. All of this sounds like a lot of business kind of conversations that we're having, finances and those kinds of things. Is this a new place for people that kind of talk about this stuff like we do?
Yeah, it really is. So a lot of the conversations are business related because when these models started coming out, particularly storage as a service models a couple of years ago from major vendors, it was all about finance, OpEx benefits, flipping CapEx to OpEx so that you can manage your budget differently. What we're seeing though now is that people are looking at storage as a service as an on-ramp to the cloud, because they can start building those procedures and the operational model and the financial models that allow them to put together a long-term strategy that's either cloud or multi-cloud, and also have the additional free capital up front so that they can make those investments. Sometimes that's skill and training. Sometimes it's consolidating workloads to kind of get them ready for that move to the cloud. But it's a large financial conversation, but there's so many operational benefits. That's why we see IT practitioners also pushing this from their seats in the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think the technical agility and flexibility was always there to a certain degree, but now that we're seeing more pressure to go to different consumption models and extend out to the cloud, and that just it just sort of enhances the need for us to be flexible, not just from a technical standpoint, but from a business standpoint as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's interesting. I mean, the whole conversation related to simply speeds and feeds is it has changed dramatically. And so, what do you feel? You know, I'm going to throw it for this kind of philosophy question out here. What do you feel that the person who was in this role 5 years ago, what do they have to do to change the way that they interact with the business now?
Well, from my perspective, like you said, the speeds and feeds conversations, we are having a lot less of them. You know, the fact is, from a just straight up horsepower standpoint, a lot of storage these days is good enough. Certainly with an all flash array, but what you really want to see is like efficiency. So, space efficiency, storage efficiency. Am I getting the most out of the array that I'm purchasing? Flexibility. You know, can I handle multiple protocols? Can I integrate this with multiple environments? Can I go from my straight up VMware environment today to putting it into a workload domain for VMware Cloud Foundation, to putting it into my container environment, to extending it out to the cloud? Those are a lot more. That's where really I'm seeing more interest these days, rather than just can I handle X amount of IOPS. It's still important. You know, you need to be able to handle the workload, but flexibility just seems to be a lot more important these days.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. We used to have a lot of speeds and feeds conversations, and now we're having more and more SLA conversations because the old version of speeds and feeds has completely transformed into service level agreements, service catalog definitions, which allows people to not feel the pressure of having to deliver their own SLA. Hardware selection process is very difficult. Pick the vendor, pick the platform within the vendor, pick the configuration, and then hope and cross your fingers that you sized it properly. With these cloud models, to Dean's point, it's very easy for them to get away from having to think so much about those speeds and feeds. If I'm standing up a SQL replatforming project, I know exactly the kind of performance SLA I need for that. So it allows those practitioners to kind of get out from under the hood of having to be responsible to deliver all of that performance and configuration, and get more into outcome-based conversations, which makes a lot more effective relationship with line of business owners who are not really as concerned about the underlying hardware. They're interested in the outcome and how that's delivered.
Awesome. So I think, we talk about as this, cultural shift maybe of the way that infrastructure works with the business goes. We oftentimes, in previous sessions here, we've talked about kind of the way that infrastructure deals with their internal clients. What do you guys see on the horizon related to that? And I'm kind of poking at like the developer side of the house that kind of has a lot of influence over this.
Yeah, right. A lot of automation. We've used the term internally a little bit that developers just sort of look at infrastructure as like the magic or the stuff that happens under the covers. It needs to be transparent to them, and just they don't, honestly, developers don't care. They don't, for the most part, right? They don't care about the platform. They don't care, what the brand is. What they care about is, if I need to make a call to a storage service, is that easy for me, and is it transparent for me? So that's really what's more important to them than anything else on the front end.
And I think it provides them a really solid conduit now as well, because so much development happens in the cloud. And at some point they go from a build to an operate and manage kind of philosophy. Having these same kind of models, building toward an SLA, assuming that the capacity and the performance is going to be there because it's contractually required for the vendor to deliver that. It just gives that developers and developer teams, I think, a lot more flexibility to build in ways that historically they're comfortable with. But also know that there's a pretty easy button to be able to bring those applications back, even on-prem, to be able to deliver them with the same look and feel, the same user experience, or even deploy them, externally or to the edge.
Yeah, and I think from that perspective, the as a service model, that gives a lot more flexibility to, I think it was you, JP, that said we could say yes more often, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You can stop assuming that that the performance and capacity is there, because it actually is, and it does allow developers to be a lot more flexible, not just in how quickly they can develop, but also what those projects look like when it's finally time to operationalize them. Even if you're having to bring it back on-prem for integrations with other platforms.
So since we haven't hit that tipping point yet, would we assume that there's a majority of folks that are kind of still, in the acquisition of information phase, if you will, or the proof of concept phase and some of this stuff? What's the advice that we can give to folks that are kind of trying to figure this out?
Well, I think the first step should be know what you have. Understand how your applications work and what dependencies they have on components in your infrastructure. You start there, and then listen to your users and understand what kind of experience they want and need for what they need to provide. And I mean, that's, sort of 30,000 feet big picture, but
Sure.
it's a good place to start.
Yeah, I would
JP?
I would add to that a lot of these offerings are fairly new when we look at the industry as a whole. Some are built around products on subscription, which operationally fall more into a kind of a traditional CapEx purchasing scenario. So you're on the hook for most of the capacity as a commitment for 3 to 5 years. That works for some customers, but if you're really interested in getting to a cloud kind of operating model for most of the enterprise, or at least for as much of it as you want to push out there, I think having kind of a no compromise approach to make sure that as you're looking at these services, are they products on subscription, or are they actually building things that are cloud-like, cloud operational benefits, cloud economics, that cloud customer experience, being able to dial your subscription up or down over time as your needs change. My encouragement to those customers is don't get too hung up on the CapEx to OpEx conversation. It really needs to be more of a CapEx versus cloud, and then think of in those terms and make sure that the offerings that you're getting will absolutely work with your cloud providers, will work in multi-cloud environments. And again, we'll support the service levels and the catalog entries that you need to be able to deliver your infrastructure, as you kind of migrate more of those workloads to the cloud.
I love that. I think that is a fantastic point, because I think when a lot of times when we talk about this as a service model, it's the CapEx OpEx conversation specifically, like that's the end of it. And, to your point, Dean and JP, it's this OpEx model is great, but it's really the as a service model, the cloud model, that we've got to make sure that we're wrapping our environment around and our everything, our entire go-to-market around. And if that isn't a fit for you, it doesn't matter whether it's OpEx or CapEx to the most part.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's a definite gold nugget. I appreciate that. Any last words for our folks that are out there? Maybe what's your crystal ball say? What's the next big thing, or what's the thing that we should be looking out for?
So we are having a lot more conversations around DevOps, containerization, and just basically providing platforms for applications. Hearing a little bit about AI and big data, but really just kind of like what I said before, making the platform transparent. Now, fortunately, a lot of our vendor partners are providing us solutions that help us do that. But that's really, we're really looking at making the infrastructure layer sort of transparent or magic.
Yeah, from my perspective, I would say, the cloud model is very mature at this point. It works well, but we're seeing that model start to propagate out into the edge, better connectivity and networking, 5G, as well as, the massive amount of points of presence that are there, and the application demands for, more latency, more hyperlocalization. Over time, I think that we're going to see that cloud operating model moving more into the edge, and the edge being more common as just another tool in the enterprise's arsenal to be able to deliver applications, again, in this really cool as a service kind of pay-as-you-go model, but also in a way that can operate just as well off-prem at the edge than it does on-prem for you.
No, good point. And I definitely agree that those kind of conversations are the things that the transformational folks are definitely having a conversation related to those. So well put. Well, thank you, gentlemen. It has been enlightening. As always, I appreciate the effort, and we're glad to have you both. Special thanks again to Dean Chyla and to JP Petty from Pure Storage. And Pure, thanks for your support on this. If anybody would like additional information related to the things we talk about and the other offerings that we've got here at Insight CDCT, please visit us at insightcdct.com. Have a great day. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys.
Jason, thanks, JP.